The cargo hauler shuddered violently as Marcus Webb fought with the control yoke, his knuckles white against the worn leather grip. Warning lights painted the cockpit in angry shades of red and amber, each one screaming a different flavor of disaster. The navigation console sparked once, twice, then went completely dark. No, 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 Marcus muttered, fingers flying across the emergency panel. His ship, the Meridian Dream, had been his home for 6 years of deep space runs. She'd never failed him before. Come on, girl. Stay with me. The answer came in the form of a grinding metallic shriek from somewhere in the engine bay. Through the forward viewport, the moon's surface rushed up to meet him. A landscape of violet-tinged rock and impossibly tall crystalline. Formations that caught the distant sun and Hun, scattered it into prismatic fragments. Marcus had maybe 30 seconds to live. He slammed his palm against the emergency landing sequence, felt the restraints tighten across his chest and legs, and closed his eyes. The impact drove the breath from his lungs. Metal screamed. Glass exploded inward. The world spun sideways, then upside down, then stopped with a final, terrible crunch. Silence fell like a shroud dot when Marcus opened his eyes. Everything hurt. The cockpit hung at an angle, half buried in crystalline sand. Smoke curled from fractured panels. His left arm throbbed where a piece of the control console had gouged a shallow trench through his flight suit. Blood, dark and wet, soaked into the gray fabric. He fumbled with the restraints, finally got them loose, and half climbed, half fell out of the pilot's chair. The ship groaned around him, settling deeper into the strange moon's surface. Through the shattered viewport, he could see the sky, an impossible shade of deep purple, streaked with bands of lighter lavender. The emergency kit was still intact in its wall mount. Marcus grabbed it, wincing at the pain in his ribs, and made his way to the airlock. The outer door hung open, bent and useless. At least he could breathe here. The atmosphere readings had been compatible before the crash. Outside, the air tasted clean and slightly sweet, like rain on metal. The crystalline formations stretched in every direction, some as tall as buildings, others barely reaching his knees. They hummed softly, a sound just at the edge of hearing that made his teeth ache. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and waited for the depressing answer he already knew was coming. No signal. The moon's unusual crystal composition was jamming everything. He was alone, stranded on an uncharted moon with a dead ship and maybe 3 days of emergency rations. Could be worse, he said aloud, just to hear a human voice. The crystals hummed their strange song in response. He spent the first hour doing triage on the ship. The main engine was cracked clean through. The power cells had ruptured, leaking their precious energy into the sand. The communication array was a twisted sculpture of metal and melted circuits. Life support was functional, but running on backup reserves that would last maybe 48 hours. The second hour was spent trying not to panic by the third hour. As the moon's sun dipped toward the horizon and the temperature began to plummet, Marcus had built a small shelter inside the cargo bay using thermal blankets and whatever wasn't nailed down. He'd managed to start a small heating unit using parts cannibalized from the galley. It wasn't much, but it would keep him alive through the night. He sat on a supply crate, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like machine oil and recycled air, and watched his breath form small clouds in the freezing air. The crystals outside began to glow as darkness fell, painting the landscape in shades of blue and silver. That's when he heard it. A sound that wasn't the wind, wasn't the humming crystals, wasn't the settling of his dying ship. Footsteps. Marcus grabbed the first weapon he could find, a heavy wrench from the toolkit, and moved toward the damaged airlock. His heart hammered against his ribs. There was nothing on this moon. The scans had been clear, abandoned, lifeless. The scans had been wrong. She stood perhaps 10 meters from the ship, illuminated by the glow of the crystals. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with a slender frame that suggested both strength and grace. Her skin held a faint luminescence, pale as moonlight, with an undertone of lavender. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus cold. Silver, bright, and reflective, like polished metal. Watching him with an intelligence that was undeniably alien and undeniably present, she wore something that might have been a suit, or might have been part of her skin. Dark material that clung to her form and seemed to pulse with faint lines of light, like circuitry drawn across her body in threads of blue and white. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said, raising one hand slowly while keeping the wrench visible in the other. His voice sounded too loud in the crystalline stillness. The alien didn't respond. She didn't move. She simply stood there, watching him with those impossible silver eyes. Marcus tried again. "My ship crashed. I'm stranded here. I'm not a threat." Still nothing. But then she moved, walking toward him with smooth, deliberate steps. Marcus tensed, but she walked past him as if he were invisible, heading directly for the Meridian Dream's damaged hull. "Hey, wait," Marcus said, following her. "What are you doing?" She knelt beside the exposed engine compartment, her head tilting as she examined the damage. Her hands moved over the twisted metal, fingers tracing the cracks and ruptures with surprising gentleness. Then she did something that made Marcus's breath catch. She reached up and touched a panel on her suit. It split along invisible seams, falling away from her shoulders and arms. Beneath it, her skin glowed brighter, and he could see what he'd thought were decorative patterns were actually something more. Raised lines that pulsed with light, running along her arms like veins carrying electricity instead of blood. "Whoa." "Hey," Marcus said, feeling his face heat despite the cold. "What are you?" But she wasn't listening. She placed her bare hands against the damaged engine core, and the glow intensified. The lines of light spread from her skin to the metal, crawling across the broken machinery like living things. The engine hummed, just for a moment, before falling silent again. She pulled back, examining her work, then began removing more of her suit. The chest piece next, revealing more of those glowing patterns across her torso. And Marcus realized with a start that she wasn't ungracing in any way he understood. For her species, this was something else entirely. The glow, the patterns, they were part of how she interacted with technology. She was an engineer, and her body was her tools. Marcus watched in amazement as she worked, her movements precise and confident. She pulled components from the wreckage, rearranged wiring with her bare hands, and wherever her skin touched metal, light followed. The ship responded to her, systems flickering to life for brief moments before dying again. But something was wrong. Her movements became slower, less certain. The glow of her skin began to dim. She swayed slightly, catching herself against the hull. "Stop," Marcus said, dropping the wrench and moving toward her. "You're hurting yourself." She turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time, and in those silver eyes he saw understanding. She knew what she was doing. She knew the cost. She gave the smallest nod, as if to say it was worth it, then turned back to the engine. Light poured from her hands into the machinery, brighter and brighter, until Marcus had to shield his eyes. The engine roared to life, power surging through the ship's systems. Lights blazed. The heating unit kicked into high gear. For one beautiful moment, the Meridian Dream lived again. Then sparks erupted from the control panel. The alien cried out, a sound that was distinctly pain despite being utterly inhuman, and she fell backward. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her as the ship's systems died once more, plunging them into darkness, lit only by the fading glow of her skin. She was hot to the touch, feverish, her body trembling. Marcus carried her carefully into the cargo bay, to the shelter he'd made, and laid her down on the makeshift bed. He covered her with the cleanest blanket he had, tucking it around her shoulders. Her eyes found his in the dimness, and though she couldn't speak, though they had no language in common, he understood what she was trying to say. Trust. I've got you, Marcus whispered, settling down beside her to keep watch. You're safe now. Outside, the crystals sang their strange song to the stars, and Marcus Webb realized that for the first time since crashing, he wasn't alone. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her falling, felt the heat of her skin against his hands, heard that small cry of pain. So he stayed awake, sitting beside her makeshift bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest and the faint pulsing glow that flickered beneath her skin like a dying star dot. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with being human or alien. The patterns that traced across her skin seemed to shift in the darkness, rearranging themselves into new configurations. And Marcus wondered if they were dreams made visible, thoughts expressed in light instead of words. Dawn came slowly to the strange moon, the purple sky gradually brightening to shades of violet and pale blue. The crystals outside dimmed as natural light returned, and with it she stirred. Her eyes opened, those impossible silver eyes, and found him immediately. Marcus leaned forward, offering her water from his canteen. Hey, how are you feeling? She blinked slowly, then sat up with careful movements. Her gaze moved around the cargo bay, taking in the damaged walls, the jury-rigged heating unit, the scattered supplies. When her eyes returned to him, there was a question in them. The ship's still broken, Marcus said, though he didn't know if she understood. You got some systems running, but ... He gestured helplessly at the wreckage around them. She stood, and the blanket fell away. Marcus tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Her body was a canvas of light, the patterns more intricate than he'd realized, flowing from her shoulders down her arms, across her chest and back, disappearing beneath what remained of her suit. They pulsed gently with her heartbeat, a rhythm slightly faster than his own. She walked to the damaged engine compartment, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. Marcus followed, watching as she ran her hands over the repairs she'd made the night before. Then she turned and pointed at the toolkit he'd left open on the floor. You want to try again? Marcus asked, moving to stand beside her. I don't think that's a good idea. You almost killed yourself. She shook her head, then did something unexpected. She reached out and gently took his hand, placing it against the engine core. The metal was cool beneath his palm. Then she placed her own hand next to his, and the patterns on her skin flared bright. Light traveled from her hand to his, a warm tingling sensation that made him gasp. And with it came understanding, not words exactly, but meaning. She was showing him that the work needed both of them. She couldn't do it alone anymore. She was too weak. But together ... Marcus pulled his hand back, staring at her in wonder. Did you just communicate with me? Through touch? She tilted her head, considering, then reached up and touched 2 fingers to her throat, then to her chest, then made a spreading motion with both hands. Light rippled across her skin in waves, different colors, different patterns, each one distinct. That's your language, Marcus breathed. Not sound, light. She nodded once, a gesture that seemed universal, and something that might have been relief crossed her alien features. Over the next hours, they worked together in a careful dance of trial and error. Marcus learned quickly that her light patterns had meaning. A steady blue glow meant calm, safe, continue. A sharp yellow flash meant danger or warning. When her shoulders dimmed almost to darkness, she was tired or in pain. Red pulses meant stop immediately. He brought her tools, and she showed him which ones she needed by touching them and making them glow. He held components in place, while she fused them together with her bare hands, light and heat flowing from her skin into the metal. When she reached for a damaged power cell, Marcus grabbed her wrist gently. "Wait," he said. "That one's leaking. It's not safe." She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face, then nodded slowly. She pointed to a different cell, one that was cracked but not leaking, and raised her eyebrows in question. "Better," Marcus agreed, releasing her. "But still be careful." They worked for hours, and slowly the ship began to respond. The life support system stabilized. The heating coils came fully online. Internal lights flickered, failed, then held steady. It wasn't much, but it was progress. During breaks, Marcus tried to learn more of her language. He would point at things and watch the patterns of light that danced across her skin in response. The engine made her glow with strong, steady pulses of white and blue. The crystals outside produced softer, more complex patterns in shades of violet and silver. When he pointed at himself and said, "Marcus," then pointed at her with a questioning look, she paused. She thought for a long moment, then reached out and traced patterns in the air with her glowing fingers. The light hung there for just a second, spelling out something he couldn't read. Then she touched her chest, and the patterns on her skin rearranged themselves into a specific configuration. A name written in living light. Marcus watched carefully, trying to memorize it, then attempted to recreate the pattern with his hand in the air. It was clumsy, wrong, but she understood what he was trying to do. Her eyes widened slightly, and the corners of her mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile. "I need something to call you," Marcus said. "Something I can actually say." He looked at the pattern she'd shown him, the way the light had moved. There had been a flowing quality to it, graceful and bright. "Sienna," he said finally. "Like the color. Is that okay?" She considered this, her head tilting in that bird-like way she had, then nodded. She touched her chest again, and this time her skin glowed in shades of burnt orange and deep red-brown. "Sienna." "Sienna," Marcus repeated, and was rewarded with another almost smile. She reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart, and her patterns flickered in question. "Marcus," he said. "I'm Marcus Webb." She tried to form the word with her lips, her mouth not quite shaped right for human speech. But he heard it anyway in the way her light pulsed. Marcus. 2 distinct patterns. 2 beats of illumination. Something warm bloomed in his chest that had nothing to do with the heating unit dot by afternoon. They'd made enough progress that Marcus felt confident trying to tackle the next big problem: water reclamation. The system had been damaged in the crash, and his emergency supplies would only last a few more days. He showed Sienna the broken filtration unit, explaining the problem as best he could with gestures and drawings on a salvaged tablet. She studied it carefully, then looked up at him and made a complex series of gestures. She pointed at the water, then at the crystals outside, then at herself. The patterns on her skin shifted to show flowing movement, like water running. "The crystals have water?" Marcus asked. "Or they can make water?" Sienna shook her head, frustrated. She tried again, this time taking his hand and leading him to the damaged airlock. She pointed outside at the crystal formations, then touched the nearest one. Where her skin made contact, the crystal began to glow from within, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. Understanding dawned. "They're connected to you somehow. Your people? You use them? You communicate with them?" Sienna nodded eagerly, her whole body brightening with what he was beginning to recognize as excitement or pleasure. She made more gestures, trying to explain something complex. She pointed at herself, at the crystals, at the ship, and made a connecting motion with her hands, weaving her fingers together. "You can use the crystals to help fix the ship," Marcus said slowly. "But you need to be outside, touching them." Another nod. But then her expression changed, became more serious. She touched her throat again, then her chest, then made a dimming motion with her hands. The light in her skin faded to almost nothing, and she swayed slightly. Marcus caught her elbow. "It takes too much energy. You're still weak from last night." She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw conflict in those silver eyes. She wanted to help, needed to help, but she was afraid of what it would cost. Marcus made a decision. "No," he said firmly. "We do this slower. We take breaks. We don't push you until you collapse again. Understand?" Sienna's eyes widened slightly at his tone, but then she did something that made his heart skip. She reached up with both hands and cupped his face gently, her skin warm against his. Light pulsed from her palms, soft and steady, and with it came a feeling, not words, but pure emotion, gratitude, relief, and something else. Something that felt almost like ... affection. Marcus stood very still, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever this moment was. Her face was close to his, those strange silver eyes searching his own. He could feel her breath, warm and slightly faster than normal. The patterns on her skin had shifted to colors he hadn't seen before. Soft pinks and warm golds mixed with the blue. "Sienna," he whispered, not sure what he was trying to say. She lowered her hands slowly, breaking contact, but didn't step back. Instead, she took one of his hands in both of hers and held it between them. Her skin pulsed gently, a rhythm like a heartbeat, and Marcus realized she was showing him something important in her culture. Touch, for her people, wasn't casual. It was sacred, intimate, and she was choosing to touch him. They stood like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, hands joined, learning each other's rhythms. When she finally stepped back, Marcus felt the loss of contact like a physical thing. That evening, they shared his emergency rations. Sienna examined the protein bar he offered her with curiosity, sniffing it delicately before taking a small bite. Her expression suggested she found it tolerable, but not particularly pleasant. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, they're pretty terrible," he admitted, "but they keep you alive." She ate slowly, watching him with those disconcerting eyes. When she finished, she reached out and touched his hand. Her skin flashing in what he was learning was her version of thank you. Marcus touched her hand back, trying to copy the pattern. He got it wrong, his skin stubbornly refusing to glow, but Sienna understood anyway. Her mouth curved in that almost smile again. And this time, Marcus was certain it was real as darkness fell and the crystals outside began their nightly illumination. Marcus set up their sleeping area with more care than he had the night before. He gave Sienna the better blanket, the cleaner section of floor, the spot closest to the heating unit. She watched him work with an expression he couldn't quite read. When he finished, she gestured for him to sit beside her. He did, keeping a respectful distance, but she closed the gap, shifting closer until their shoulders touched. Her skin glowed softly in the darkness, creating a small bubble of light around them. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for saving my life, for fixing my ship, for not giving up on me." Sienna turned to look at him, and in the dim light, with her face so close to his, Marcus realized something that should have terrified him, but somehow didn't. He was falling for her. This strange, beautiful alien who spoke in light and touched with sacred intention. This engineer who risked herself to help a stranger. This person, because that's what she was, regardless of species. A person who had chosen him, who kept choosing him, again and again. She must have seen something in his expression, because her patterns shifted, softening to warm colors that reminded him of sunset. She reached out slowly, giving him time to move away if he wanted, and touched her forehead to his dot. The gesture was gentle, deliberate, and utterly intimate. Marcus held his breath, feeling the warmth of her skin, the subtle vibration of the light pulsing beneath it. In his mind, without words, he understood what she was telling him. I see you. I choose you. We are not alone. When she pulled back, Marcus was smiling. And for the first time since the crash, he felt something other than fear or desperation. He felt hope. They lay down side by side that night, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The last thing Marcus saw before exhaustion claimed him was the gentle pulse of light across her shoulders. Steady and strong as a heartbeat, and he knew that whatever happened next, whatever challenges they still faced, they would face them together. Outside, the crystals sang their strange song, and somewhere in the darkness, two hearts, human and alien, beat in time.